What's going on, my babies? Welcome back to another episode of The Spiritual Word. As always, I apologize for any noises in the background in advance and anything of that nature. And before I start these, I like to start these off with a disclaimer by stating that these are for entertainment purposes only. Always do your own research to come to your own conclusions, to make your own decisions, to have your own answers. And I believe in your ability to do so and to be your own person. So, before I start these, I have an audio version of the podcast anywhere you can find audio podcasts and a video version of the podcast on YouTube. They're both named The Spiritual Word. I'm your host, Jackie. I upload Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Mountain Time. I have science, psychology, spirituality, self-help, and philosophy are things that you're interested in. Then I recommend subbing or following whatever platform you're finding me on. And with that being said, let's jump right into today's episode. So I'm going to do most of these. I feel like I speak on a spiritual level just because I feel like if you're speaking from a spiritual level, everything is kind of over. How do I say this? It's like an umbrella term for everyday life because we all have the same experiences, although they're not the exact same experiences because I'm not in your physical body. You know what I mean? But we all generally have the same feelings. We all generally have the same experiences. We all get happy, sad. We all have insecurities. We all have things that empower us and our strengths and our weaknesses. So, from a spiritual point, I'm going to teach you how to have confidence because you have to recognize what I don't want to say what the experience of living is, but I feel like you need to have a perspective that empowers you to live your life to the fullest extent, to the fullest possibility, or to your fullest capability, and not let fears or doubts or all those things stop you. So, first things first, this is gonna be kind of harsh, and I apologize for that in advance just because, like, I'm not gonna sugarcoat anything, although I would love to sugarcoat it for you and, to make it very sensitive and very cute, but there's some things that you can't be sensitive to, and that's gonna be my first main key point. When you think that you don't have confidence, it's usually from other people telling you that you shouldn't be confident, whether that be from trauma, whether that be from traumatic experiences, or family, or friends. Or friends I use lightly because if they cause you trauma, are they really friends? You know what I mean? And family, if they cause you trauma, are they really family? So, with that, obviously, you can argue with me and be like, yeah, because it's blood, but we're not. Besides that, I'm getting off topic. So, if you feel like you don't have confidence from my spiritual perspective, you have to understand that everybody has insecurities. Everybody in life, everybody who's ever been a person, who's ever walked Earth, who's ever been alive, has had insecurities. So, in that regards, nobody's special. I'm not special. The person listening is not special. You watching, you're not special. And this is why I say it's going to be harsh. Because you have to recognize that a lot of the times your insecurities make you want to feel different, feel unique, right? And your insecurities have this way of like making you feel kind of like babied, if that makes sense. Like, I don't want to be too brutal, so I'm just gonna like move on with that. But basically, you have to understand that you're not special in the regards that everybody has a lack of confidence. It's all about what you do with that lack of confidence when it's presented to you. What do you do with that? It's kind of like every single day, your brain is feeding you information. Some of it is good, some of it is bad. What do you do with the bad ones? Because your insecurities and your flaws and your lack of confidence is coming from the bad information. If people tell you you're ugly, that is a bad, your brain interprets that as bad information because it's not a good news. It's not good news. And so if it's not good news, then it's automatically bad news, right, in your brain because we only have on and off and yes and no, up and down, left and right. We can only calibrate so far, right? So when you're in this experience that you're having this bad piece of information brought to you, what do you do with that bad information? Do you take that as in, okay, like for me personally, I take that as an indicator of who the other person is, because most of the time we're mirrors to the other people. And like, I don't think that I've ever really gone out of my way to like go up to somebody and be like, oh, you're a piece of shit. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that in my way of living, that to me is very foreign. So for someone else to bring me that piece of information, and for some random other person to come up to me and be like, you are a piece of shit, I'll be like, oh, that's weird. Like, I've never had an interaction with you, yet you have this piece of bad information that you want to give to me so bad. And I look at that information and I take everything that other people say with a grain of salt, because they are not in me. And only I can look at the true evidential things that are going on in my body. And when I looked at the timestamp, it was 555. And recognize that when you're looking at the bad information and the good information, regardless of the information is changing something in you. So if I went up to you for, I don't know, maybe 3 years, and every single time that I went up to you, I said something good about your personal insecurity. Let's say you're like, oh, I don't like the way that, I don't know, my nails look, or I don't like the way that my face is structured, or I don't like the way that my hairline is like receding. I don't like this specific thing, right? This specific thing, only you know your specific insecurities, right? And I came up to you, and the biggest, fattest insecurity that you had, the one that's the worst, the one that you think about as soon as you talk about your insecurities, I go up to you and I compliment you on that specific insecurity. That would feel good, right? And over time, you might think to yourself, well, if this person likes it, then who cares, right? Like, if I was your significant other and I told you this is the part of you that I actually really like, and the reason that I like it so much is because you specifically hate it. And to me, it's not really a big deal. And they do that over and over and over and over and over and over, then you're gonna feel like it's not so bad, right? And so it's what you do with the information that people are giving you. Because if I give you bad information, most likely you're gonna interpret it and be like, oh my gosh, like that's so bad, right? Like if I came up to you and I was like, you're the ugliest person I've ever met, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, I'm the ugliest person they've ever met. And it's like a panic moment, because bad news always puts you into a panic. That's what bad news does, right? And you're not necessarily trained on how to react to bad news, but most people's reaction to bad news is to panic. And so you panic because you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm the ugliest person. They said it. I know it. Like, it's there. This information has to be true. They gave it to me. And they're on the outside, which means that they can see me. When in reality, the only person that can see you is you. So when you get bad information, you need to use that in a good way. And for you to use this bad information in a good way, it's kind of like, if I was getting bullied because I don't have braces, and people are like, ew, your teeth are so ugly, ew, your teeth are so ugly. And let's say, like, me personally, like, I can't afford braces. So I have to deal with that. So my using this information, I'm gonna use this information to not care. I'm gonna use this information as, okay, you don't like my teeth. That's good for you, but let me think about it. Do I like my teeth? And maybe at first I'm with them and I'm like, fuck, no, it's ugly. I don't have braces, I need braces. And then I look at people who get veneers and who get braces and who whiten their teeth, and I'm like, ugh, you should have just kept your real ones. And in those moments, I'm looking at myself and I'm like, oh, actually, you know what? I do like my teeth. Or I do like this about me. And so, what do you do with that bad information? Do you turn it into a good thing? Do you use that as reinforcement to do something? Or do you do nothing with it and you let it sit and simmer? And I know a lot of people who will let that sit and simmer. Like if I came up to some, mom who's very insecure about being a mom or being a good mom, and I'm like, you are a terrible mom, they'll probably let that simmer, right? And that simmering of the bad information does not feel good. It's kind of like if I left my hand on a hot stove. The hot stove is not a bad thing. It's my relationship to the hot stove, because I use that hot stove to nourish me, right? I use it to cook my food. So it's not a bad thing. And heat itself is not a bad thing. Heat itself is literally what gives me life. And if I put my hand on a hot stove, it's just a sensation. But if I keep my hand on this hot stove, of course it's a bad thing because it's burning me, right? So what do you do with this information? This information, by nature, is not a bad thing. This information is there to show you something. Whether it is that person being a dickhead, or whether that person just wants to be honest with you, or whether this person is trying to hurt you intentionally, right? Or whether that person is there from the universe, because everything that has ever existed will exist and has existed and does exist in this current moment. And so you can't always blame that other person because sometimes they're just not there. You know what I mean? Like, some people really don't think about the information that they're giving you when they give it to you. Like, I remember me as a kid, like, I was so oblivious to all the things that I was saying. Like, little kids will just point bad shit out. You know what I mean? And they won't know that it's bad. They'll just point it out. Like, I remember going up to people and being like, oh, you're mean. Like, you're rude. Or, I obviously wasn't allowed to say bad words, so I'd just be like, oh, you're really rude to people, or you're really mean to people. Why? And so recognize what that information is there to do. Because sometimes it's there to teach you something. Like, if you're insecure about personality traits or something, like, people have come up to you and they're like, you're very manipulative, and you're insecure about being manipulative, then change that about yourself. You know what I mean? It's something that I don't think is bad per se. I think your relationship to that thing is bad. Everybody has the capability of anything and everything. So whatever I say is just an example. And same thing could be said about your looks, because most people don't feel confident based off of their looks, which doesn't make sense to me personally, because there's people out in the world who I like, right? There's people out in the world who you like. There's people out in the world who a lot of people like. Like, if I look at celebrities, I know so many people who, like, in the gay community, they look at Billie Eilish and they're like, oh my gosh, she's so hot. And to me, I'm like, I don't see the hype. You know what I mean? And so recognize that that's going to be you. People are going to think that you're attractive, and some people are not. And that's not up to you. That is not up to you to decide. And I think when you want it to be you, that's when you're using this information in the wrong way. If you feel insecure because you're like, well, I don't feel like I'm the hottest person in the room, that's okay. Because sometimes recognize that some people don't want that. Like, I know a lot of straight girls who love and who think that Pete Davidson is hot. And I'm like, he literally has darker eye bags than me. Way more pale than me. It looks way more malnourished than I do. And you think that that's attractive. So recognize that when you have these types of experiences, it's not like a bad thing. Like, it's just something that everybody experiences. When people don't find you to be specifically attractive, it doesn't mean, like, this is something that I think that a lot of people get mixed up. Like, if you went up to a really pretty individual and they, like, looked at you and, like, laughed and, like, scoffed and, like, oh, you think you have a chance with me. If you've ever had that type of experience with somebody, number one, they are a piece of shit. Because there is a way to say no without hurting another person. And they did not care about you enough to do that, which means that even if you were good enough for them, they wouldn't care enough about you to not hurt you intentionally. And recognize that that's true for a lot of people, especially the people who think that they're, like, the hottest shit that you've ever seen. And in my opinion, I think that people who identify themselves to be less attractive as other people are usually the good people in this world. Because if I'm ugly, and I know, right, ugly, quotation marks, because I don't think that anybody's really ugly, but if I think that I'm ugly, then I'm gonna try to win you over based off my personality, not based off my looks. I'm not gonna use my looks to my advantage in this world. I'm not gonna make fun of other people because I know what that hurts feels like. I know what it feels like to be called ugly. I know what it's like to be bullied. I know what it's like to be laughed at. So I would never want to do that to another person. But if I'm still sitting here and I'm ugly and I've gotten laughed at and other people have gotten laughed at in front of me and I laughed at them too, I'm a piece of shit. Like, point blank, period. And I have full strength to say that. You know what I mean? And so if you're insecure because you think that you're not good enough for other people, recognize who you're actually not good enough for. Because if people sit there and they're like, you're ugly, you're not on my league, don't even talk to me, they are a piece of shit. Why would you want a piece of shit in your life? It's that simple. And some people who go based off of looks, purely, solely based off of looks, you need to recalibrate, recalculate why you're using this information for that reason. Because if you're not confident, this is like your wake up call. If you don't feel confident, why don't you feel confident? Because some big head bitch was like, oh, you're ugly? Oh, you're not pretty? Oh, you're not smart? Oh, you're not funny? Who? Because genuinely, that shit pisses me off. Know your worth. And you're worth way more than anybody has ever made you feel. Now, with this information that that person has given you, one, recognize that if that person's a piece of shit, you need to care about you. Because no one in this world is going to know you better than you. And you know how you want to be taken care of, and you know what you need to be taken care of with. So if you're sitting there and you think that you're not cute enough, you're not smart enough, then practice those things so that you feel enough when somebody comes around and you're like, I like that one. Or if you just feel like, I want to be that person. I've always looked up to these people, I want to be like them. Be them. But it doesn't take, just being them to be them. It takes practicing to be them. And if you're really struggling with something like looks or, some sort of confidence thing, I feel like your confidence comes from being, or from feeling like you're good enough. Or feeling like you're good. Good in whatever regards. Whether that be you're good at, I don't know, a sport. You're good at math. You're good at English. You're good at writing. You're good at, fashion. You're good at singing. You're good at dancing. You're good at video games. You're good at something, right? And use that to help you channel that feeling good enough for other things. If you're like, oh, I'm not good at anything, that's a lie. Everybody's good at something. You just have to figure out what you're good at. Like me, for a long time, I was like, I'm not good at anything. Like, I suck. But I'm good at these types of talks. You know what I mean? Like, I'm good at actually understanding information on a spiritual level. And so I use this information to help me, and I've always done this. And I always thought to myself, well, I'm not good at anything. Like, I don't sing, I don't dance. How am I going to be entertaining if I want to make videos, but I don't know what to make them about? I found my strength, and my strength is this. And I use this strength to empower me to do other things. Like, when I hop on and play video games, I don't just, sit there and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I'll never be like a major league gamer because I'm not good enough. Now I sit there and I'm like, bet your ass I will be at that level one day. Just by putting in time and effort. And you put a lot more strength into yourself when you look at these objective things that people have brought you. Because they're not good, they're not bad, they just exist, and they're going to exist. Someone is going to tell you that you're the ugliest person alive. Maybe not this life, maybe in the next one. You know what I mean? Like, you're gonna be told that you're ugly, you're gonna be told that you're not funny, you're gonna be told that you're not intelligent, you're gonna be told all these things by either strangers or people that you know, and it's gonna happen. Or maybe it's already happened. And so you're like, well, yep, it's already happened. So we're good. It's happened. Phew, like, I can get that fear away from me. And for people who it hasn't happened to, like, for example, actually, I don't even want to get into that. This is already going to be long, so I'm not even going to get into that, but basically, when you feel like you're not confident, it's your insecurities trying to push you around in your life. And you can't let them do that. And it doesn't mean pushing them back and being like, oh, we can fight, because that doesn't really get you anywhere. And, when you fight fire with fire, it only ends up in a bigger fire. So recognize that when your insecurities are coming up to you and they're like, I'm ready to beat somebody's ass, and they got their hands up and they're ready to fight somebody, you sit there and you calm your insecurity down. You sit there and you're like, okay, insecurity, it's not that big a deal. And if it is, then so what? I'll back you up. I'll back you up and we can fight this person. Like if I am insecure about going up to this person because I think that they're going to reject me or something. And so I have no confidence in that regard. And my confidence is like, nope, don't do it. Don't do it. We're in danger. We're in danger. Don't do it. You have to sit there and be like, look, insecurity, I know that you want to push me around and tell me what's good for me and what's bad for me, but right now, I know what's good for me. And I know what's bad for me. And right now, you are what's bad for me. So sit your ass down and listen up. And then once you do that, it empowers you because you moved through something instead of moving past something. You know what I mean? Like, there's a difference between covering something up and dealing with something. And in that moment, when you deal with that fear, you'll actually feel very good about yourself because you're like, oh my gosh, like I did that. And also recognize that you do those things when you do those things, because sometimes you can be really focused on just being that person, and you miss the wins that you get in life. Like the fact that, I don't know, maybe you don't feel confident and you see a really pretty person in the same room as you, and you're like, I'm gonna go introduce myself and I'm gonna make this person my friend. And then you go up to this person, you're like, hey, what's your name? What are you doing here? If you're at school, you go up to this person and you're like, hey, what are you doing? Do you know what day it is? Can I borrow a pencil? Like you just make conversation, and then once you leave that interaction, you're like, oh my gosh, I did that. Like I was so scared to do that, but I did it. Even if it ended in failure. Because it's not about, most of the time you're fearful about rejection, or you're fearful about a certain outcome, or you swear to God you're going to get this specific outcome, but then you do it and then it doesn't end up like that. And you're like, whoa, that's crazy. I thought that this person was just going to tell me off, and this person didn't do that. So that was cool. That was a different experience. And notice that that different experience was brought to you thanks to the fact that you were able to deal with this fear or this insecurity, and recognize that confidence comes from being secure in those insecurities, in those fears. Confidence comes from you actually taking care of yourself. Confidence comes from you actually putting in the time and effort and energy it takes to shut down those fears that are stopping you currently. And with that being said, I'm gonna end this here just because I feel like that's long enough. And yeah, I think that's it. Thanks for tuning in and tapping in. If this wasn't helpful, then I hope that it was entertaining in some way, shape, and form. And yeah, with that being said, thanks for tuning in and tapping in. As always, I love you and I appreciate you, my babies, for being here. There would be no me without you. So yeah, with that being said, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.